Give us some overview of who you are and especially why you're excited about Bitcoin.
Yeah, I'm David Saint-Ange. I'm French Canadian, so that's why I have this weird accent in English. Yeah, I'm from I live near Montreal, and I discovered I found Bitcoin in 2018, and I've read like quite a few books, maybe 30 or 40 books about Bitcoin in like 2 years, and then I decided to write my own book, which is Bitcoin, Everything You Need to Know. I wrote it in French first to attack the French market, and then we have it translated. And yeah, I wrote this book because I was thinking that my mother would not like read 10 books about Bitcoin to understand it. So I made like some kind of a summary of all the books I've read to make something like more concise for the layman to understand Bitcoin. And during those research, I found I was really deep. I went really deep into hyperinflation. I studied a lot of hyperinflation. We did a podcast together about hyperinflation. All those bills with a lot of zeros, or all those worthless currency that I give out to people at conference. I went to Miami and gave out like 2,000 of those bills at the Bitcoin conference in 2023. So maybe some of you might have seen me in a conference in France, in Canada, or in the United States, giving out those bills for free as bookmarks for books, because they're completely worthless. So that's my profile. I study inflation, hyperinflation, and now I'm more deep into history of money, because I wanted to understand how money emerged, and that's a deep rabbit hole. And I think that's what's going to be the subject of the podcast today.
Absolutely, I would love that. And it's also it's highly really commended our first episode, and people also really loved it, where we talked about hyperinflation, and you have like, literally like books with all the coins, and you can actually see them. So, and we actually, I think we showed them actually in a podcast. So I think this is actually something really cool to check out. But today it's something super interesting in how money, what's the origin of money and how money actually emerges, especially then also looking at like how does this affect Bitcoin and how did
Yep.
Bitcoin emerge and all those things. But maybe let's start with the two theories that you kind of have with those commodity and with the views that you have there. How does money emerge?
Yeah, there's two leading theories. There's the commodity money theory that are backed by those more classic economists or Austrian economists that says that money simply emerge out of barter. And yeah, so people back in the days, maybe in Mesopotamia or earlier than that, maybe in Neolithic, uh, had some goods that were largely that had a lot of demand for, and those economists thought that maybe the most exchangeable or the more sellable good that, well, the current way to say that is the more sellable good. But back in the days there were no like commerce, so the good that had the most demand for exchange would be chosen by those tribes to as some kind of proto money, so that's how they see that. So a good that is easy to exchange, that naturally emerge and is used by a lot of people to exchange, and that would be the root of money. The other theory is the credit theory of money, would basically say that there was no barter that was used. Yeah. Oh, those those. That's the Mac thing. Sorry about that. Woo! Fireworks. Yeah. So those tribes would not. Well, there's no proof. They said that there's no empirical proof that barter was used really a lot for the exchange. They say that it was only used between different tribes, not inside tribes. They say that inside tribes, they would just use credit, informal credit. So their theory pretend that credit precedes money, and that those tribes were not doing barter; they were doing informal credit. So let's say formal credit. What is informal credit? It's just that I'm going to give you a fish, and later maybe you can give me some wheats. Yeah, that's just informal credit, and you can do that for in tribe that are like smaller in size. As soon as you get like real civilizations, like Mesopotamian civilization back in let's say third millennium BC, you would get civilization that are so big that you cannot do informal credit. You need money at that point. So they would say that this kind of credit view of exchange, so you just exchange favors and services and goods inside your small tribe, that would precede money, like sorry uh, uh, merchandise, not merchandise. I'm looking for the word. There's the credit theory of money, and there's the
Commodity.
commodity. Sorry,
Yeah.
because it's marchandise in French, and it sounds like merchandise, but it's not the same word. It's commodity. Sorry, you can cut that. So the when you have the credit theory theorists thinking about money, they would say that their theory is the real one, because credit precedes commodity money, because we were using informal credit between humans way before coins. Let's say coins were invented. Coins were invented very recently, like in the 7th century BC, and we were using informal credit millennium before, like let's say in Mesopotamia. But we do had some monetary system in ancient Egypt and ancient Mesopotamia. We'll cover that today. So I want to start by saying that the birth of money is not the birth of coins. Money existed before, and we're going to explain that there were monetary system in Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt that precede coins by millennium, and we're going to explore that. So it's not that clear that credit. Well, I'm pretty sure that credit, informal credit, precedes like the use of money, but it doesn't invalid the theory of the emergence of money from trades between humans back in those days. So I think that's what we're going to cover today.
That's super interesting. So there's like the credit where I just say like, hey, I'll give you a fish and you give me a rabbit. Weird trade, but like one of those things. Then you have an actual credit where you kind of write down what you owe, and like this is kind of like a book where a ledger that you kind of hold, and then there's just like barter, straight out like, oh, I give you this, and then those are kind of the three things that you've described, right?
Exactly, and you can add another category just to make that more complicated. Is that you can have delayed barter. So, you will, in your example, if I give you a fish, you give me a rabbit later. That we can call that delayed barter. But the credit money theorists will say that it is credit. It's not barter. But those commodity money theorists would say that it is just delayed barter. And that's one way that the money could emerge. Let's say that in our little tribe, fish is a really high exchangeable good. It could be the money of our tribe, and it can emerge from delayed barter. Yeah.
But what is the, like, it seems to be just a different word, like delayed barter or credit. Like it's just like it's the same thing at that point. I mean, also it's interesting, when does delayed barter become credit? Like how many minutes, hours, days have to be kind of forgone to actually make them credit?
That's a good question. Yeah, the thing is that here it's interesting because there's two different proposition for the emergence of money, and both use the same concept to prove their theory. So so basically, uh, um, uh, the, the credit theorist will call delayed barter credit, and the commodity theorist, commodity money theorist will call this delayed barter to prove that money emerged from barter. So there's a lot of confusion here. And by the way, we don't know. We simply don't know which theory is correct. As I said earlier, I think I recognize that the informal credit precedes money, but it doesn't invalid the fact that money can emerge from exchange in those small tribes. The only reason that informal credit is for sure precedes the use of monetary system is that to have a monetary system you need specialization in your well, that's, we don't really know which way is it. If you want specialization, so some if you want one person in your tribe to concentrate on making boats or making pottery, if you want to evolve like that, you need some kind of money, because if this person can accumulate a good and pay later for his food, he won't have to do his get his own food. That's start all start here. If someone can liberate some hours to specialize in one thing, like let's say do pottery, well, he'll have to get in food in another way. So he won't always exchange his pottery for food, because at one point people people who make food will not want more pottery. So at one point they use money to exchange any goods, well, any, and yeah, exchange money for any good that some people would need. So we call that the double coincidence of needs or want. So what do you need at when you need something? The other person that needs something will not always match what you have. So those two people have some people need some rabbit and some people need some fish. If both people have those goods, they're going to do a trade, but it's not always like that. So it's called the double coincidence of wants. So
Interesting.
yes, so money is fixing that basically. So you can accumulate money and buy whatever you want with it, because and everybody is going to accept it, because that's the role of money here. And it end up allowing those artists, well, those people who specialize in one thing, making pottery at those point in time, like millenniums ago. They were able to specialize in those things, let's say boats or better axes and stuff like that. Yeah. In French, it's called artisanat. I'm going to Google it up and just to translate it, because I don't know the artisanat in English. It's called craftsmanship. Sorry. So yeah. So it allowed people to specialize in some craftsmanship. Before that, everybody was like a peasants, to make his own food to survive, basically. Yeah.
There's one aspect of money that you kind of didn't touch on, that it's also not just a means to just exchange things, but it kind of became a ranking system in our society of like, oh, like how much money do you have? Like you keep track of things, which is interesting. And I already had one guest on, I think like maybe a few more, but like one that where we really discussed it, where he said we now have Bitcoin and we might have the chance of being in such an abundant future where we don't need money, and money kind of unemerges. I have no clue
Wow.
how to say that. I have a hard time believing that.
We'll need free energy. We need fusion. We'll basically need fusion to have that.
But do you
So, yeah.
think a money-less society without ranking, without money, where we just say like, oh, I want a Ferrari now, and like just you order it on your phone and like it stands there, you don't have to pay for it because we have so many Ferraris, so it doesn't really matter. Like, is that? Do you think that
Well,
that is even achievable?
there's 2 points here. We start like this. Before specialization, before craftsmanships, people were all equals in those society. We're talking Neolithics, like millions, like thousands of years ago, and they seems like almost all equals, and they had all the same type of house. All the tombs were alike, and it's really when the exchanges, like not commerce but really economic exchanges began. They had some rare things like bitumen, and they had like some stones to craft axes and knives and stuff. And when they began to exchange that, there was a concept of wealth that emerged, and then inequalities began to show up, and we can see that in their houses. Their houses became different. The people who accumulate a lot of wealth at the type of wealth at the time would have different houses than people that would not accumulate those goods. So we can see that it's an evolution, like not inequalities, because it would be weird to say that, but it kind of is like commerce brought more wealth to exchanges brought some more wealth to people that were able to produce or accumulate more of these goods, and it shows in their tombs and in their houses, because we don't have any written trace from that time, right? So all we can see is their houses, their settlements, how houses were set up, and their tombs. That's what we have access. And to in their tombs, we can see that they maybe were put there in their tombs with those axes and maybe some golds and some jewelries. And we can see that there were some hierarchical, difference in different classes, even back in those days, because of the emergence of commerce. And to the second point I want to talk about, if you want to talk in a new way that we're going to have no more use of money, we would need two things: a society like Star Trek, maybe, where food is abundant, energy is abundant and free, and we have some kind of robots or way of making all the thing we need without works. Because if you're talking about a Ferrari, if someone have to make if any human has to make the Ferraris, how well you need to pay them, or at least, well, maybe we can talk about, maybe we can think about communism. You say that, that everybody works but nobody pay. Well, how do you distribute the resource? That's always a problem. It's always centrally planned. So if you think of a centrally planned future, whereas food is free, energy is free, and and robots are, maybe we can get rid of money, but I don't really think it's possible. I think money is useful to distribute the resources more efficiently. So even in a society that have access to free energy and free food, we could still put our time in projects we think are worth something. So if it's centrally planned, you do what the central planner think you should do. That's communism. And if you want to live in a free society that where you decide what you do with your time, you need money. That's the way I would say it. So saying that we would reach a society where we don't need money, I think it's the only logical way to do that is communism. And I don't think you're going to be free, because you're not going to be able to decide what you do with your time. So if you want to live in a free society, for me, you need money, because when you decide to do something, well, you make a choice. You almost always make an economical choice. So what is the best thing you can do with your money? So I think money is really useful in a free, well, is needed to have a free society. Yeah.
I agree with that, and I love it's hard for me to imagine a moneyless society, especially because I do think there will always be something like materials, experiences, activities, whatever that will be rare and have more demand than supply.
Exactly.
And then you need money to kind of deal with, with
Yeah,
that
who's
reality.
going to get that those resources? Of course, yeah, for sure. So in the communism, it's all the people at the top that receive all the rare things, and the peasants there receive all the rest. That's basically it. So people have a hard time to understand that capitalism and money is just a way to distribute resources in the fair way, I guess, because it's not limited to like those central planner that are gonna use the system for their own sake.
Yeah, and now back to the money emerging question, because it's
Yeah.
super interesting. There we had times where gold emerged as money. We had times where stones and seashells and all those things emerged as money. I mean, there's like in jail, there's cigarettes, like there's
Hmm.
all types and forms of money. But then we also had that have that fiat thing that kind of emerges, and not as like those opposing views that say like, oh, like gold, that's how money emerges, and no, like there's like also credit and there's fiat, and it's
Yep.
fine to have that view of that. How and you said already there's like no right, like there's no like that one theory, just because in history we have seen both. Like we now
Yeah.
live in a fiat world, and we previously lived in a gold standard, and maybe in this fiat world now Bitcoin is emerging. How do you make that someone, like, it's so hard to explain. And also when you I don't know if I have a specific question, actually. I'm just rambling, but I have a lot of interesting thoughts on that, because if you ask people on the street right now, like just like 500 random people, and ask them what is money, there will come a lot of different answers. They will say like, oh, like, because when you ask it, for example, in Austria, they will say like, oh yeah, euro, that's money.
Hmm.
There might be someone in there that says like, oh yeah, like gold, that's money, right? There might be a lunatic like me saying like, oh yeah, Bitcoin, that's money. Or someone saying like, oh, you have to have that the properties of money, and then they
Yeah.
explain like, oh, store of value, medium of exchange, and all those things. So it's such a defining question that there are so many different views in there, which is kind of then saying, if there's so many different views and so many different angles and perspectives, there's nothing you can really relate to anymore, and it's just
Absolutely.
random.
You're right, and I'm gonna add to this whole confusion because we're gonna talk about three things. We're gonna talk about China money, the emergence of money in China. It's super interesting, and it's never discussed anywhere. I've never seen this subject anywhere, and so I guess it would be new to any listeners that are very interested in history of money. I've read that in one book, and it's really really interesting. I'm going to cover that. The second subject I want to cover, it's how the commodity theory of money. The if well, a lot of Austrian economists or classical economists thinks that Bitcoin cannot be money because it did not have a utility before. One of the less interesting point of view of the commodity theory money is that to emerge, money has to be a good that has a utility before, so it has to be used before, and then it can become money. And a lot of Austrian economists can think that Bitcoin doesn't have that prior utility, and I differ. I don't agree with that. Bitcoin can be used for a lot of things before becoming money. It couldn't be just a token that like geeks exchange between themselves, or be used to like a digital token before being money. So it is actually how it started. Be some crypt like some geeks in the in 2009 were exchanging that for fun. So that's utility to me. So it doesn't break that. So yeah. So there's so those two theories would well, the commodity theory of money would tend to say that Bitcoin is not a commodity to start with, and I don't agree with that. So it cannot emerge as money. And on the other side, the credit theory of money does fit with Bitcoin, because Bitcoin, like some virtual money. It's not physical. It's like, it's just, you think that in the future someone will exchange some value, if you give them some Bitcoin. So it's a bit like, it's not credit, but well, it's like fiat. The only reason fiat is worth something, it's because we think that in the future we're going to be able to exchange that for some goods and services. That's it. So I think it's the exact same thing with Bitcoin. It's not like, oh, with gold, the people will say, well, gold is physical, it has other use. And my critic, my answer to that is like, yeah, but it's used in industries, but only like 10% of its stock is used in industry, so maybe 10% of its value. So if we would stop to use gold as money, it would not be worth $3,000 per ounces. It would be worth maybe $300 per ounces. So it's not where its value comes from. Its value comes from is monetary premium.
Thank you for watching this video. This was only a snippet of the podcast. And if you want to watch the full episode and get all of the context of this episode, you can click right here or here. Oh, maybe also here.